social life I ever had was when I worked on construction. I really got along with the construction guys. We like to talk about how to build things. We also like to do a little boys club and talk about, well, wouldn't it be funny and do some like really juvenile age 10 joke, you know, to the boss. That you wouldn't dare do. But when I was in high school, I did pull off a great flying saucer hoax, and I had the whole school thinking they'd seen a flying saucer. No, it was a round piece of cardboard covered by tin foil with a Dairy Queen dish on the top with a light in it. I'm very concerned today about all the bad behavior on TV. Sports people behaving badly. See, the thing is, I'm much more a product of my environment and how I'm brought up than the normal person is. I absolutely despise those Survivor shows. I despise that awful Donald Trump show. And the reason why I hate these shows so much is, what about teaching cooperation? What about teaching teamwork and getting along with people? You know, it's just winning at all costs. You got sports figures cheating and stuff like that and getting away with it. I wasn't exposed to that as a kid. There was very clear-cut good and bad. You know, well, I hope this mic is going to keep working. You know, many movies just don't have clear-cut values anymore. When I was a little kid, Lone Ranger and Superman, it was very clear about good and bad. The other thing is, they didn't show graphic gore. Yeah, they had plenty of guns, but they didn't show graphic cruelty. And I think graphic cruelty is really, really bad. And you need to teach positive religious values. Let's just keep it nice and concrete. Concrete ways on how to be a good person. You might get the kid a little keychain that says, what would Jesus do? He's not going to tease. He's not going to kick people. He's not going to steal stuff. He's going to be kind. And you just teach the golden rule with a whole lot of positive, concrete examples in the real world. That's the thing to do. Let's just avoid the abstract stuff. I think OT is a very important part of a program. Pressure. I loved pressure as a kid because pressure helped to calm me down. You know, here's a therapist working with pressure. You do swinging or balancing on a ball or pressure. Sometimes it helps stabilize the brain and helps your speech therapy to get through. Therapeutic riding, because you're doing balancing and rhythm plus the really great relationship with the horse. I've heard about kids that started talking. But do your ABA right while you're doing some of your OT things, like pressure, swinging, or maybe sitting on a ball. You know, balancing activity. Steve talked about the Miller method, where they get up on these raised boards. Why does that work? Because that's balancing. It's either balancing, rhythmic, or pressure. Here's my squeezing machine. When I got into puberty, I had horrible anxiety attacks. Anxiety attacks just so terrible. I was desperate for relief. And I found pressure from the squeezing machine helped to calm me down. Another thing that helped was lots and lots of exercise. So another thing is, kids need to be getting lots of exercise. The research is very, very clear on that. Here's a front view. Now, of course, I could control the squeezing machine. I couldn't stand being touched as a kid. I wanted to feel that nice feeling of being held, but I just got an overwhelming tidal wave of stimulation. And at first, I pulled away from the squeeze machine, but then gradually I got to where I could tolerate being touched. And I think it's very important to desensitize these kids to being touched, because that nice feeling of being held helps you to have feelings of kindness. I found that using the squeeze machine helped me to have better dreams. I would see it in my dreams. Now, here's a rule system I still live with today. I figured this out in high school. If you want to have a civilized society, you've got to prevent really bad things, like killing people, stealing, burning down buildings, that sort of stuff. Then you have the courtesy rules. Those were pounded into me as a kid. And when I first made my rule system in high school, I didn't even have the courtesy rules in there, because it was so second nature to me, I just didn't realize it until I started seeing what some of the more kids today have been doing. Then I have the places where I tested the limits, where can I get away with breaking some rules? Illegals, but not bad. And I can tell you some illegals, but not bad. Doing something to thwart school bureaucracy is a really, really good example of illegal, but not bad. And then you have the sins of the system, very society specific. And in my high school, there was sex, drugs, and sex, drugs, and not drugs so much. We didn't have that. Alcohol and smoking. And as long as they could trust me on that, and they knew I wouldn't run off in the bushes with the fellas, I knew I could get away with a lot of illegals, but not bad. Then there were things like going out on the roof, riding my horse in the pasture unsupervised, going out in the hill and flying my kite, staying up past bedtime. I knew I could get away with these things as long as I didn't flaunt it, as long as I was kind of, subtle about it. And boy, I can tell you, even today, sometimes, I find the things I've done in the meat industry, if I asked permission for everything I did, I'd never get anything done at all. But let me tell you, these sins of the system, they hurt you. And some little sexual transgression that would get you thrown in jail here, in Holland, it doesn't mean anything. These puppies bite, man. You don't mess with the sins of the system. It's just that simple. You don't touch them. Now, Einstein had many autistic traits. I think Dr. Baron Cohen's going to be talking about this. No language till age 3. I like this book, Asperger's and Self-Esteem. It's about famous scientists and engineers that probably have Asperger's. And back in Thinking in Pictures, my book I did 10 years ago, I talked about the idea of people like Einstein, Van Gogh, and Gregor Mendel, the inventor of genetic principles, probably were Asperger's or mild autism. Now here's the Satellite Assembly Building. Let me tell you, the world's biggest sheltered workshop for the socially challenged. But the thing is, this is the place where we want to have them, the real smart Aspie kids, this is where we want to have them go. We want to have them get into these things. And yes, we have to teach social stuff, but you're not going to make them socially related. I have to learn how to act in the play, but there's sort of a social emotional relatedness that I may not, I just may not have. And you can't make an Aspie into something that they're not. Now, I like to dress kind of eccentric, and this gets to coming halfway. There's a whole thing where some Aspies you say, well, you need to accept everything that we do. I don't think rudeness needs to be accepted. I don't think slottiness needs to be accepted. Yes, I'm dressed kind of eccentric, and I had to learn. I had a boss back in the 70s that gave me a bottle of deodorant and told me my pits stunk and I better be using it. It's that simple. Let's work on preparing for employment. We need to start doing this in high school. Teenagers need to have jobs. They've got to learn skills like being on time for work. When I was in college, I interned at a research lab. When I was 13 years old, I worked for seamstress just 2 afternoons a week. They got to learn how to manage money. The other big thing is mentors. Let's look at things that were really important to me. Early intervention with great 40 hours a week of one-to-ones, and my teacher did some ABA type stuff, and then a lot of turn-taking games. Developing the area of strength into a skill that other people want and appreciate. People are not interested in talking about cattle chutes. Yeah, and I used to like to do that. They're interested in having me design cattle chutes. That's the difference. And then mentors. Mentors in high school and college. Mentors in the workplace. And how do you find these mentors? Talent attracts mentors. This is where the portfolio of work comes in. Visit interesting workplaces. Look at trade journals. You got to get kids exposed to interesting things out there. Just all kinds of interesting things. Things that can turn into careers. Now, my close relatives, typical family history, and in our family history, very, very Aspergerish. On my dad's side, we had 4 generations of bankers, all non-visual thinkers, very Aspergery. We did not have any low-functioning, or nonverbal type of autism. My grandfather on the mother's side, MIT-trained engineer, anxiety and depression, both sides of the family. Now, the kind of gastrointestinal kind of problems, I didn't have that. You see, this is where you get into the mild Asperger. And the diet didn't do anything for me. I tried a lot of supplements. They didn't do anything for me. See, then you get into these ones where they regress at age 2. Those are the ones where I think a lot of the biomedical things really, really do work. And there's a new book coming out that I get asked to do blurbs on books, and I got the galley proofs for it. And I unfortunately don't remember the doctor's name, but I read all his cases in the back, and over half, like 7 or 8 out of 12 cases were regressive types, or they had tons of medical issues. Visual thinking skills on the mother's side, some food allergies on my dad's side, intellectual giftedness on the mother's side, and definitely Asperger traits all over my dad's side. No question about that. But we did not, as far as I know, have nonverbal types of things or severe gastrointestinal problems. Let's get kids involved in clubs with things like Lego Mindstorms. I'd rather have them doing this than playing video games because you've got to build things. And then you program them. And they need to get them to work with another child. One of the complaints I'm hearing today from the instructors of these kind of things is they can't get these kids to work together in teams. We need to be teaching that maybe one child programs the computer, the other child makes the mechanical parts. You know, that they've got to divide up the work and get some kids working together. We need to start teaching that at a young age. And this is another thing where being a child of the 50s helped me. And people have asked me, why don't you, cover up your skunk stripe up here with a, hair dye or something. Well, I'm finding at the age, I'll be 60, next summer, that the way I was brought up is, influenced, I think really, really helped me. And I think the people that are nonverbal today, they've got things, a whole lot more better services. But you take a very mild Asperger, they're getting all kinds of trouble. They're going to jail for all kinds of stuff and things like that. And I think it has to do with not being, not getting the social training. Let's look at some of our educational resources. Kids being tortured in high school, maybe need to take some classes at the community college. Maybe take a technical class in drafting or auto mechanics. Online learning, and then universities. Like this stuff that they're putting out free at MIT, I think it's just great. Now, there's where I started my career. And how did I get into the Swift plant? I met the wife of their insurance agent. And she saw my hand-embroidered shirt that she liked. Let's look at some jobs for the visual thinkers. Computer graphics specialist, drafting, auto mechanic, electrician, fixing computer networks, setting up computer hardware. I wouldn't be that good at programming, but I'd be good at setting up the hardware. Photographer, training animals. Let's look at things that use the skill area. And kids need to start interning in things. Where they want to become a veterinary technician, well, then they better work for a vet and see if they're going to like that job. How about the music and science? Well, I'm sure Dr. Baron Cohen's going to talk all about that. The physicists, the engineers, musicians, statisticians. These are all of the pattern thinkers. Scientific researcher, chemistry teacher, chemist. When you think about all these different jobs, they all involve patterns rather than things that are photorealistic. And then how about the verbal thinkers? Journalist. I know I've been interviewed by journalists that I know are on the spectrum. Both print journalists and radio journalists. All kinds of archiving and library jobs. Accounting jobs. I bought a new car recently, and the guy that did the contracts in this family dealership, I'm sure he had Asperger's, and I want to say he had a greasy tie that I wanted to rip off and burn. But he did a very good, accurate job of doing the contracts. But also, let's look at some of the sensory things and how we can accommodate it. I heard about a kid that got fired from Barnes & Noble because he refused to wear a tie because it wasn't comfortable. Well, that could have been easily fixed. You just you buy a shirt at a thrift shop, it's nice and soft with a collar that's one size too big, then you put the tie on, and he's not even going to feel the tie. That could have been fixed. One can accommodate their dress code without having to deal with the sensory thing. It's just unacceptable. Or maybe you could wear a clip-on. Let's try to figure out some ways we could solve the problem. Because we kind of have to come halfway on these things. Okay, they want ties on the people. Well, ties don't have to be uncomfortable. I mean, this is real loose. Wear them real tight. I don't like that. Okay, here are bad jobs for people on the spectrum. Anybody on the spectrum.